Welcome back. In this video we're going to do a chart with me, and you're going to follow along as I extract the 5 main points from a chart. And the chart we're using this time is Warren Buffett. This follows on from the video I did the other day about the 5 main points of a chart reading, and in this video we're going to actually extract those out and find out what they are, and then in a following video we will do an interpretation and decide what it is we actually want to say about the chart. So this is for aspiring astrologers wanting to know how to get to the core of the chart as quickly as possible. So many of you have written to me and said that you're struggling with interpretation and where to start, because let's face it, when you actually do get a birth chart, there is so much to look at once. And even though you may know something about astrology, and perhaps you know about the planets and the signs and the houses, bringing it all together, creating a synthesis, an interpretation of the chart is really key to being able to read astrology charts well. We all know that charts have hundreds, if not thousands, of detailed bits of information within them, and it can be overwhelming when you start to read charts. This is why I like to do the 5 key points method, and each chart will be different. The 5 key points that you pull out of a chart are going to result in different answers, and this is what we're going for. Generally, when I do chart readings, I work with the margin and body method. I can talk a little bit more about that later on, where you're getting the notes from the chart. So when you first see a chart, you actually are able to see immediately what's important and zoom in on what you need to do. If you've got 3 weeks to interpret a chart, or 3 months, then by all means go down every single road. But in the meantime, we want to be effective astrologers. You want to get into the chart as quickly as possible and get to the main points soon. So this is the method I use, and I've been using it for many years, too many years to mention, about getting the main information out from a chart. Because the idea is that you want to make an immediate connection with your client. You want to be talking about issues that they're dealing with. Even though there may be other pieces that you find interesting as an astrologer, if they're further down the pecking order of what's important and what isn't, then you can get to those in a later consultation. But when you have your first consultation with your client, you want to be able to talk about the chart, about the strong features in the chart, and what are the main drivers in the chart that are actually affecting this person's life. So doing a chart with me implies that you have a certain amount of astrological knowledge, that maybe you do know what the moon in Libra means, or you do know what the first house is all about. So this, I would say that this is perhaps an intermediate type video for aspiring astrologers, where you're now gathering your threads to come together to actually start to do an interpretation. If you're following along and enjoying this already, please do consider giving me a like. It does help me grow. So now we're going to actually have a look at how I extract the main features from a birth chart in a chart with me. So let's get started with chart with me. We're going to be looking at the chart of Warren Buffett. And you can follow along as I work through Warren Buffett's birth chart, extracting the high-level information. So the birth details are: birth time was 3 p.m. His birth date is August the 30th, 1930, and the birthplace is Omaha, Nebraska, USA. Now, as an astrologer, we know that 3 p.m. is probably not exactly the correct time. It could have been 10 minutes to 3 or 10 minutes past 3, but it's the time we were given, so we're going to work with that as birth time as given. And just to be clear, the birth chart defaults that I'm using for this chart are pretty straightforward. I'm on the tropical zodiac, and I'm using Placidus house cusps. So we're going to be looking at the 5 key points to doing a high-level chart interpretation. They are the balances, the ascendant complex, the chart ruler complex, the luminaries complexes, and major aspect patterns. And if you need to have a refresher about what all these are about, you can check out this video I did recently, and it's telling you exactly which of the how to pull out these key pieces of information. Quick and easy chart reading. Okay, so let's move on. So the first up, we have the balances, and this has to do with the sign components within the chart. And they are the 3 components of polarity, element, and mode. Because what we're going to do is we're actually going to count the planets in this chart to see if there's an emphasis on polarity, element, and mode for him. Now, the big question here is which planets to count, and clearly there are many ways to skin this cat. However, what I'm suggesting is that you actually do quality over quantity counting, and that actually means that you only count the 7 visible planets. And the reason for this is that they have been in human consciousness since the dawn of time. You can go outside tonight, look up and see any of these 7 visible planets. So although some astrologers may count in the outer planets and Chiron and the Ascendant and Midheaven, I don't, and I recommend you don't either, because we want a quality count, not a quantity count. And I'll talk more about that in another video. Anyhow, so you are going to be counting the visible planets within the chart, and that is the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So there will only be 7 planets that we're going to count for our balances for polarity, element, and mode. Here we have this handy dandy table that will be filled in, and I fill this table in for every chart I ever do. And across the top we have the elements of fire, earth, air, and water, and then the total for the elements. And then down on the left hand side we have the modes of cardinal, fixed, and mutable, and then it will be the total for the modes. So because we're counting 7 planets, they will both add up to 7, both by row and column, as you'll see. So now with the table completed, we see that we've got the Moon in mutable fires, that's a count of 1. In Earth we have Saturn and the Sun for a count of 2. In air we have Mercury and Venus for a count of 2. And in water we have Mars and Jupiter for a count of 2. And then going across to check on the modes, we have Saturn, Mercury, Venus, Mars and Jupiter for a count of 5 cardinal, 0 fixed, and 2 mutable. Now we're going to have a look at polarity, and generally polarity is active and passive, or masculine and feminine, or positive and negative. And when we actually look at the spread of planets, we can see that the red planets are the positive planets and the green planets are the passive planets. So active, passive. So there is a slight emphasis there. You've got 1 in fire, 2 in air. That gives you a total of 3 for active. And then there is 2 in earth and 2 in water, giving a total of 4 for passives. So in general, passive is slightly dominant in this chart. Next, we'll have a look at the elements of fire, earth, air, and water. And we can see clearly I've highlighted each of the 7 planets with the colour for the elements. So we have the 1 fire planet is the Moon in red. Then we have the 2 earth planets in green, which is the Sun and Saturn. Then we have the 2 air planets in yellow, and that's Mercury and Venus. And then finally we have the 2 water planets, which are Mars and Pluto in Cancer, and they are in blue. So there's your totals running across the bottom: 1 fire, 2 earth, 2 air, and 2 water. So actually this is what we would consider balanced, when the elements are considered to be in balance, when the planets are equally spread amongst them. As the elements of earth, air, and water each have 2 planets, the elements are deemed in balance, because that is the best way you can balance a number 7. Next, we're going to be looking at the modes. So we have cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And now again, looking at the planets there. So the cardinal planets are Saturn, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter in the purple. There are no fixed planets in this chart, and there are 2 mutable planets, the Moon and the Sun. So there are the totals there: 5 cardinal, 0 fixed, and 2 mutable. This is giving a dominance of the cardinal mode, and we'll note that. So next up we are going to look at the ascendant complex. And the ascendant complex consists of the ascendant sign, any aspects to the ascendant degree, and any planets in the first house. So in his chart, the ascendant sign is Sagittarius. The aspects to his ascendant are: the ascendant is square Mercury, the ascendant is sextile Venus, it is opposition Mars, and trine Neptune. And the ascendant is also trine the North Node. So all of those aspects which are drawn there from the ascendant are radiating into the chart from the ascendant. They are the aspects to the ascendant. And then our third point for the ascendant complex is any planets in the first house, and there is only one. He has Saturn in the first house, so we are going to note Saturn as well. Now we're going to turn on to the chart ruler complex, and the chart ruler is the chart ruling planet. We're also going to consider the chart ruler's sign, the chart ruler's house, any aspects to the chart ruler, and any other elevation by position of the chart ruler planet by such things as, is it most elevated, is it the final dispositor, is it the almuton or something like that, is it in dignity or oriental or something important in that way. So the chart ruler is Jupiter. Jupiter rules the ascendant sign of Sagittarius, therefore Jupiter is the ruler of this chart. So we want to know which the chart ruler's sign, and Jupiter is in Cancer. We also want to know what is the chart ruler's house, and Jupiter is in the 7th house. And then we would consider the chart ruler's aspects. So here we have 3. We have Jupiter square Uranus, Jupiter conjoined Pluto, and Jupiter square the midheaven. So those are the 3 aspects pertaining to the chart ruler, and we're going to note those. Then we're going to move on to the Sun complex, and the Sun complex consists of the Sun's sign, the Sun's house, the Sun's aspect, and any elevation the Sun will have by position within the chart, such as I said before, if it's the almuton or the final dispositor or something like that. So first up we have the Sun's sign, and the Sun is in Virgo, so we're going to note that. The Sun's house, the Sun is in the 8th house, and then we're going to look at the Sun's aspects. So here we have the Sun is square the Moon, the Sun is semi-square Venus, the Sun is trine Saturn, the Sun is conjoined Neptune, and the Sun is semi-square Pluto. So there are 5 aspects pertaining to the Sun, and all of those will be interpreted in our main interpretation of this chart. Next, we're going to be looking at the Moon complex, and the Moon complex consists of the Moon's sign, the Moon's house, the Moon's aspects, the lunar phase, and any elevation by position that the Moon may have in this chart. So the Moon's sign is clearly Sagittarius. It's actually in the same sign as the Ascendant, so we have come across Sagittarius already in this interpretation. The Moon's house is, the Moon is in the 12th house, and then aspects to the Moon, of which there are several. So the Moon is square the Sun, it is sextile Mercury, it is semi-sextile Saturn, it is square Neptune, and sesquiquadrat Pluto, and the Moon is semi-square the midheaven. So this means that the Moon has 6 aspects to it that need careful consideration, and you would interpret all those one by one separately under the Moon's aspects. We then consider the lunar phase, and there are 8 lunar phases, and so if the Moon's position, it has moved away less than 90 degrees to the Sun. As you can see, it's 89 degrees 48 minutes. It is still in the crescent phase, and that would be the lunar phase for interpretation in this natal chart. Finally, we're going to be looking at major aspect patterns, and there are a few in this chart. We have a Mercury T-square, a Pluto T-square, and a Chiron Thor's hammer. So I'll just point those out to you now. So first up we have the Mercury T-square. Quite clearly there it is. Mars is opposition Saturn, and both are square Mercury. So the 2 planets in opposition are squaring Mercury. That's why it's referred to as a Mercury T-square, because Mercury is the focal planet within this T-square, and the energy of Saturn and Mars flows towards Mercury in the 9th house there in Libra. There is also a Pluto T-square, and in this particular case we have Venus is opposition Uranus, and both are square to Pluto. So Pluto is there in the 7th house in Cancer, and this would be a cardinal T-square, and all the energies from Venus and Uranus will flow towards Pluto. Finally, we have our 3rd major aspect pattern is a Chiron Thor's hammer, And in this case, we have Mercury squaring Saturn, that's the red line, and both are sesquiquadrate to Chiron. So this is a manifesting major aspect pattern. All the aspects are of the 8th harmonic, and it makes it quite a challenging aspect, similar to a T-square, but with a little bit more rigidity. And because the two planets in square are pointing towards Chiron, that's what makes it a Chiron Thor's hammer, as the energy will be pointed to that focal planet of Chiron in the 5th house in Taurus. So now we're going to have a look at the actual printed chart and how we annotate it. So what I have here is the chart printed from Solar Fire, and I do apologize for the leg of my tripod in there, but I'm going to get this text sorted out one day perhaps. So there's all the details for Warren Buffett, and these are the notes that I will be making now on his actual chart. I always print the charts out in colour. It's easier to see, and also you can then see the actual aspects on the planets as well. So what I'm doing at this point is I am drawing the glyph for the planet that rules the cusp of the houses. So we can see I put Jupiter there on the Ascendant, and then for the 2nd house cusp, which is Aquarius, I've got Saturn and Uranus. For the 3rd house cusp, which is Pisces, I have Jupiter and Neptune. Then on the 4th house cusp, I'm drawing a Mars there for the rulership of Aries. Just adjust it around a little bit. On the 5th house cusp, we have Venus, because Taurus is on the cusp of the 5th house. And then for the 6th house, I'm drawing Mercury, as its rulership is over Gemini. And you'll notice too that Mercury is on the 7th house cusp as well. So already we know that Mercury is ruling 2 houses right there. No doubt more to come. Moving on to the 8th house cusp, we have the Sun ruling Leo on the cusp of the 8th house. And then he has Virgo on the cusp of the 9th house. So again, Mercury will be the planetary ruler of the 9th house. That's just, by the way, making Mercury a ruler of 3 houses in this chart altogether. Then Venus rules the midheaven and the 10th house cusp with Libra at the top. As we can see there, just by the way, that Venus is well placed on the midheaven and in Libra. That's just a note. And then on the 11th house cusp, we have Mars and Pluto, because Scorpio is on the cusp, so there are the 2 rulers. And then for the 12th house cusp, which is Sagittarius, we have Jupiter again. So every house cusp now has the planet that rules it just drawn on the chart. I then go in with my yellow highlight pen, Tombows if you want to know, and I highlight the chart ruler Jupiter, because everywhere Jupiter appears in this chart will be important. I highlight the actual Jupiter planet in the chart. I then move down to the aspectarian and I highlight Jupiter. Everywhere I see Jupiter on the chart, it will be highlighted from now on. So then moving on, I'm making just a couple of notes at the very top there under the name and everything, and I'm noting that the chart ruler is actually Jupiter, because I will write it on the chart so I can pay attention to it in future. And then while I was there, I just noticed that there was another Jupiter on this chart that I hadn't highlighted in yellow, so I quickly touched that up. Now I'm moving on to discover to determine what the lunar phase is. So I look at the sun and I see what the angle is from the sun to the moon, and note that the lunar phase for this particular chart is a crescent, and I write that on there on the front as well. The next thing I'll be writing on the front of this chart is to find out about the hemispheres and quadrants, and I do this by taking the top right hand corner and drawing a circle. I then divide it into 4 to symbolize the 4 quadrants, and I will count how many of the visible planets are in each quadrant. So in the first quadrant there we see we've got Saturn only, so that should be a count of 1 quite clearly, and then in the second quadrant I think there is absolutely nothing, so that will be a 0. Then we move on to the third quadrant, and there's Mars, Jupiter, the Sun and Mercury, so that will be a count of 4. And then in the 4th quadrant, there's only Venus and the Moon, so I would write 2 in there. So in this way, you can see your quadrants, and you can stretch it to see which are the strong hemispheres too. I again highlight the strong quadrant, which is the 3rd quadrant in this chart. Now I'm going to be drawing the little table on the side. This is the table I draw for the balances. I put it on every single chart I ever do. So it's a little table that's 4 columns by 3 rows. And then I'm symbolizing at the top, it's fire, earth, air, and water. They're going across the top, they're the 4 elements, and then the 3 modes will go down the side of cardinal, fixed, and mutable. What I then do is actually count which of the planets are in the particular one. So we have the cardinal earth, that's the Saturn in Capricorn, that would be the cardinal earth. I then have Mars and Jupiter in cardinal water, so that will be 2 for cardinal water. I then count further round, and where am I going? I've got 2. No, the Sun is in Virgo, so that's mutable earth. That will go into the mutable earth spot on the grid. That will be a 1 for mutable earth. And then I'm looking back up at the top, and I see I've got Mercury and Venus both in Libra, so that's 2 for cardinal air. And I will note that on the actual table. And then the last one is actually the Moon, which is in Sagittarius. I'll get there. It's the Moon in Sagittarius, there it is correctly, and that will actually be mutable fire. I see that I wrote it in the wrong spot on that table. It just shows you. So should it be mutable fire is 1, so the total for cardinal is actually 5, although I did fix it afterwards. But anyway, it happens to us all. So now I'm just counting up the elements down: fire, earth, air, and water. 1, 2, 2, 2. So that is absolutely correct, and you can take that bit to the bank. So there I'm highlighting in yellow the actual cardinal piece on this chart, because cardinal is still prominent. It's 5 out of the 7 planets are in the cardinal mode. So that's what we're doing at this point. Now I'm going down the side in my far margin against each of the planets that have essential dignity. So because Venus is in Libra, that has a +5 on the regular count. Now I'm drawing my attention to Saturn, which is in Capricorn, so that will also receive +5 because Saturn rules Capricorn, so it's got essential dignity there. And then just scanning back through the chart to see if there are any other planets that has essential dignity. And it seems that Mars is in Cancer, which is actually in its fall, so Mars will get a -4 count on the far left margin. This is showing essential dignities count. Interestingly, so Venus and Saturn are prominent planets for him. And now I'm actually starting to pick up on the major aspect patterns. I'm highlighting there I think that's the Mercury T-square. I'm drawing them in red lines, the whole thing, so I can highlight them on the chart, and I can see quite clearly where this T-square is. So because it's T-squares and generally made up from squares, it's done with in red. And then down at the bottom here on my notes, I'm actually going to write a specific note about that particular T-square. That is the Mercury T-square, and that's the one that I'm drawing down there. So I'm making a note. We're calling it the Mercury T-square. I draw the little T-square itself on the chart so that I can see it afterwards and see exactly which planets are part of it. So there you see Saturn, Mercury, and Mars, and the C means that it's actually, this is a cardinal T-square, which is kind of important because you have different types of T-squares, and so it's going to be a hard driving T-square for this man. Then I go back up and I'm going to pick up the second T-square, which is, I believe, the Pluto T-square. Again, I'm pulling down the opposition there from Venus to Uranus, and then the squares up to Pluto. So you can see that the one T-square lays over the top of the other, but it's giving energy to this chart. We'll go into it in more detail later. So Then I actually draw the Pluto T-square on my notes at the bottom, and I will be drawing the little triangle in the way that it's laid on the chart. So you can see the Mercury T-square was pointing up and the Pluto T-square is pointing to the right, because that's generally how it's laying in the chart. The idea of writing these annotated notes on the chart is that if you don't look at this chart for 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years, and then you come back and you want to immediately get into the heart of the chart. So I always pull out the highly important things on a chart, and I like to use color and make a note of what's actually important. And then the third major aspect pattern, as you know, we went over it earlier, is going to be the Chiron Thor's hammer. So Thor's hammer has a square at one end. So the square is between Mercury and Saturn, which is already marked up because it was part of that T-square. And then we are going to add the sesquiquadrates in orange towards Chiron from both Mercury and Saturn. So the idea is that the colours of these aspects do mean something. When it's an orange, it's a sesquiquadrate or a semi-square, which are part of the 8th harmonic, and that's why they are in orange, whereas the squares are always in red. And then finally, I'm just drawing a little note to myself down the bottom here about the Chiron Thor's hammer. So it's quite clear when I come back later what this was I was highlighting. And I will actually draw the Thor's hammer very much the way it's laying in the chart, so we can see it clearly. So these little sketches, and I have to say my pen wasn't the best pen on this day, but these little sketches are there to help you or me see what's important in this chart straight away. This is why we highlight on the chart. It's no good just printing a chart off from SolarFire and just keeping it that way. You need to be highlighting it, making notes on it, and drawing attention to what's important, because you haven't, if you're working on the chart for a week, or, I don't know, a day or two, you really want to get into it quickly. If this is your client and they come back next year, you want to pick up that chart and know straight away what's important. So then I'm just going in then and colouring in the little major aspect patterns in colour. The Thor's hammer will always be in orange, and the 2 T-squares will be in red. Now I'm actually moving back to the top of the chart, and I'm going to colour the whole thing in on the top, because this is how the energy is flowing. Now the T-squares will dominate the Thor's hammer. That's why the Thor's hammer is actually coloured behind. If you can see, it might make it clearer in the end. But I will actually colour each of the triangles, and I'll fill the whole thing in, but I'm trying to do it as neatly as possible, so that it's quite clear where these T-squares actually are. The idea being that this is your major aspect patterns show the dialogue between the planets. They show the actual, the main messages of the chart, and you'll do well to stick with major aspect patterns. The fact that he's actually got 3 patterns in his chart is just happenstance. So he's got the 2 T-squares, which are dominant there, and then he has the Thor's hammer, which goes at the end. I did then go over again with a bit of orange to try and make some kind of effort with the Thor's hammer, but you can see clearly it's lying behind the T-squares because it's not as important. I'm just going over there again now in black so I can highlight these T-squares so I can see exactly where they are and which one's dominant. So the Mercury one is on top of the Pluto one. Always visible planets typically will overwrite an outer planet in a natal chart. It's not always the case, but in this particular case it is. So there's my 3 major aspect patterns. We've got the Mercury T-square, the Pluto T-square, and the Chiron Thor's hammer. I'm then going back down to the aspectarian, and again with my yellow, I'm going to be highlighting. I'm looking for the tightest aspect between planets, and it has to be Ptolemaic, and I exclude Chiron. So I'm actually looking through to see which are the tightest aspects, and then I do go through and pick up one, giving some consideration to the actual orbs. I'm looking at the orbs here to find the tightest one, and I thought it was actually the square from the moon to Neptune, but then I did notice the trine from Sun to Saturn at 1 degree 24 minutes orb, and that is actually the correct one there. So I'm highlighting that in yellow, and then I'm actually going back into whiteout, the one I incorrectly marked. So it happens to us all. I'm going in there with a white pen to mark that out, because that wasn't the tightest one. The square was only 1 degree 51, whereas the trine was tighter at 1 degree 24. So that trine between the Sun and Saturn is the tightest aspects in his chart. And I've marked it there so you can see I want to highlight the tightest aspect in the chart so I can see it. It's also a very good indicator of a driver. So here we have it. This is the main chart for Warren Buffett. I've coloured it in, I've highlighted it, and that's how I would have a chart when I was going to start from this point to do interpretation. So there it is. If you've got this far, you're doing excellent. What we've done is we've gone through, we've extracted the 5 main points of this particular chart for Warren Buffett. We have gathered the threads that we're going to look at first. We are dismissing things that have not come up in what we have pulled forward, and we're going to interpret those items first. Perhaps in a later video I will be showing you how to compile it all together and gather your thoughts and how to present it in a cohesive fashion. But in this basic chart with me, we're pulling chart details forward, and you can use this method on any of the charts that you have. If you like this chart with me method, do let me know, or if you'd like to see more videos like this chart with me to help you understand how to extract information from a chart, please do give me a like or comment below. Also, if there's somebody's chart you would be interested in me looking at and extracting the information for, then do certainly comment on that. Generally, I do like to work with charts of people who've actually done something in life, artists, creatives, people who've changed the world. But do let me know whether this video was of value for you, and let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this one. I'm Alison Price. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.